At 03:18 hours on the 13th of April 1945, outside Blankenburg in the British zone of occupation, 29 German women stood against rusted fencing in near freezing temperatures. The war had ended 5 days earlier in this sector. Allied trucks idled 30 meters away, exhaust visible in the pre-dawn air. These women, factory workers, auxiliary soldiers, civilian administrators, had been processed through 3 checkpoints since capture. British records noted their condition as malnourished, exhausted, cooperative. The standard protocol called for detention, interrogation, and transfer to larger holding facilities. What happened instead would be documented in after-action reports filed weeks later, when commanding officers tried to explain the deviation. A corporal from the King's Own Yorkshire Light Infantry handed the first woman a wool blanket, then bread, then water from his own canteen. The gesture spread down the line without orders. In the official log, someone wrote, "Humanitarian provisions extended per Geneva Convention." The reality was simpler and less procedural. On 13th April 1945, Ingrid Steinbauer stood fourth in line along the fence perimeter at Blankenburg. She was 22 years old, previously employed at the Hermann Göring Werke munitions plant in Salzgitter. Her work card, confiscated at capture, listed her role as Rüstungsarbeiterin, armaments worker. She had been walking west for 11 days when British advance units intercepted her group near the Bode River. The soldiers spoke no German, she spoke no English, but the pattern was familiar enough. Capture meant processing, processing meant detention, detention meant uncertainty. She kept her eyes down, hands visible, posture non-threatening. The British lorries bore markings of the 7th Armoured Division. Their engines rumbled in steady rhythm, diesel fumes cutting through the damp spring air. A young officer stepped forward, his uniform showing mud stains from the advance through the Harz Mountains. He carried his rifle slung low, barrel toward the ground. His face showed exhaustion more than hostility. He motioned toward the trucks with one hand. Ingrid noticed his hands were steady despite the cold. He said something in English. A short phrase, 2 words. Another soldier approached, holding a brown wool blanket. He extended it toward her. Ingrid hesitated. The soldier waited, not forcing the gesture. Finally, she took the blanket. It was warm, recently removed from supply storage. The texture was coarse but clean. She wrapped it around her shoulders. A third soldier appeared carrying a canvas bag. He withdrew a loaf of bread, dark rye, likely from German stockpiles, the British had secured. He broke it in half and offered one piece to Ingrid. She stared at the bread. The scent was unmistakable. Yeast, flour, the faint char of oven heat. She accepted it. The soldier nodded once and moved to the next woman. No threats were made, no questions asked. Ingrid held the bread in both hands, feeling its weight, its warmth, its impossibility. The truck departed Blankenburg at 04:35 hours, heading northwest toward the British medical station at Quedlinburg. Ingrid sat between 2 other women, her knees drawn up on the cold metal floor. The lorry's suspension transmitted every rut and crater from the road surface. Through gaps in the canvas cover, she watched the landscape pass. Burned farmhouses, abandoned Wehrmacht positions, craters from artillery strikes. The other women remained silent. One, a woman named Hilda from Magdeburg, clutched her blanket tightly. Another, younger, perhaps 19, stared at nothing. The British soldiers in the truck spoke quietly among themselves. Their tones were conversational, occasionally punctuated by brief laughter. Ingrid had expected brutality. She had heard stories from women who survived Soviet occupation in the Eastern Territories. She had seen how German forces treated captured partisans. The absence of violence was disorienting. The truck stopped twice, once for mechanical inspection, once to allow a column of American vehicles to pass. At the second stop, a soldier offered water from a canteen. Ingrid drank carefully, rationing the liquid despite her thirst. At 06:20 hours, they arrived at Quedlinburg. The facility was a converted gymnasium, now housing British medical personnel and supply units. No barbed wire surrounded the compound, no guard towers. A woman in civilian clothes approached the truck as they dismounted. She wore a Red Cross armband. She spoke in broken German, her accent heavy but comprehensible. "We will care for you," she said. "You are safe now." Ingrid wanted to believe this. She wanted to accept the words at face value. But trust had been eroded by years of propaganda, months of bombardment, weeks of collapse. She stepped down from the truck. The ground beneath her boots was packed earth, still soft from recent rain. The air smelled of disinfectant and wood smoke. Inside, cots were arranged in neat rows. By 14th of April 1945, Ingrid had been assigned a cot in the western section of the Quedlinburg facility. British medical staff conducted initial examinations. A nurse recorded her vital signs: pulse elevated, blood pressure low, signs of malnutrition and dehydration. Treatment began immediately. Rehydration salts, vitamin supplements, careful portions of soup and bread to avoid refeeding complications. The medical protocols were thorough. A doctor, Captain Morrison of the Royal Army Medical Corps, examined her hands. She had sustained burns during a bombing raid on the munitions plant in February. The wounds had healed poorly, leaving scarred tissue across her palms. Morrison made notes in her file and prescribed antiseptic dressings. "We'll monitor for infection," he said through a translator. Ingrid lay on the cot afterward, staring at the gymnasium ceiling. Wooden beams crossed overhead, marked with soot from a fire that had partially damaged the structure months earlier. The weight of exhaustion pressed against her. She had not slept more than 3 hours consecutively since leaving Salzgitter. Now, surrounded by relative safety, her body began to register its fatigue. A nurse brought soup, potato and leek, seasoned lightly. Ingrid ate slowly. The warmth spread through her chest and stomach. For years, food had been scarce. Rations had been cut repeatedly. The factory workers received preferential allocations, but even those had diminished as the war dragged on. This soup was simple, but it was enough. Tears formed without warning. She tried to stop them, to maintain composure, but her body betrayed her. She cried quietly, holding the empty bowl. The nurse returned, saw her tears and placed a hand on her shoulder. She said nothing. The gesture required no translation. Later that afternoon, Ingrid was given a clean uniform, British issue, too large but dry. Her old clothes were taken for laundering. She changed behind a partition screen, feeling the strangeness of fabric that was not torn or stained. The days at Quedlinburg followed a pattern: wake at 06 irregular hours, medical checks, breakfast, porridge with dried fruit, light duties for those physically capable, folding linens, organizing supply crates, cleaning common areas, lunch at midday, rest period, dinner at 18 hours, lights out at 22 hours. The routine was strict but not harsh. British soldiers maintained order without intimidation. Ingrid observed their interactions with the other women. There were no assaults, no coercion, no exploitation. This contradicted everything she had been told about Allied occupation. By 20th April, she began to assist in the facility's kitchen. The work was familiar. She had helped her mother prepare meals before the war. The British cooks worked efficiently, preparing food for both the medical staff and the German detainees. One cook, a sergeant named Davies from Wales, showed her how to operate the field stove. He demonstrated adjustments to the fuel flow, pointing at gauges and valves. He spoke no German, but his instructions were clear through demonstration. Ingrid learned quickly. Within days, she was preparing vegetables for soup, measuring rations, assisting with meal distribution. The work provided structure. It occupied her hands and her mind, but questions remained. Why this kindness? What did the British expect in return? She asked Hilda one evening. Hilda, older and more pragmatic, shrugged. They follow rules, she said. Geneva Convention. They are documented. This explanation felt incomplete. Ingrid had seen rules ignored before. She had seen conventions discarded under pressure. Yet here in this converted gymnasium, the rules held. On 24th of April, a British officer addressed the women during evening assembly. He spoke through a translator, a German-born woman who had fled to England in 1938. "The war is concluded," he said. "Germany has surrendered unconditionally. You are prisoners of war under British custody. You will be treated according to international law. You will be fed, housed, and provided medical care. You will not be harmed." The words were formal, precise, administrative, but they carried weight. Ingrid felt something shift. Not trust, but the possibility of it. By early May 1945, the Quedlinburg facility housed 73 German women. New arrivals came daily as British forces processed displaced persons across the occupation zone. Each woman received the same initial treatment: medical examination, clean clothing, food, shelter. The British maintained detailed records. Every name was logged, every medical condition documented, every personal item catalogued. This administrative precision surprised Ingrid. She had expected chaos, improvisation, the disorder that followed military collapse. Instead, she found systems. Captain Morrison continued his rounds. He checked healing wounds, monitored recovery from malnutrition, treated respiratory infections common in the spring cold. His medical reports were thorough. When supplies ran low, antibiotics, bandages, vitamin tablets, he requisitioned more through official channels. Sometimes requisitions were filled within days. Sometimes they took weeks. But they were never denied. The British logistical network, even in occupation, functioned with remarkable consistency. Ingrid's duties expanded. She now helped manage meal preparation for the entire facility. She worked alongside British cooks, learning English words for ingredients and equipment. Potato. Knife. Boil. The language came slowly, but it came. By mid-May, she could understand simple instructions without translation. One morning, Davies the cook showed her a photograph. His wife and 2 daughters standing in front of a stone cottage in Swansea. He spoke their names slowly. Ingrid nodded, understanding the gesture if not all the words. He pointed to her, then to the photograph, asking a question. She shook her head. "No family," she said in German. Davies's expression shifted, not pity but acknowledgement. He returned the photograph to his pocket and continued working. That afternoon, a new transport arrived. 12 women from a forced labour camp near Nordhausen. They were in worse condition than Ingrid's group had been. Severe malnutrition, untreated injuries, psychological trauma. Medical staff immediately prioritised their care. Ingrid watched as British nurses worked through the night, administering IV fluids, cleaning wounds, providing blankets and reassurance. By dawn, 3 of the new arrivals had been stabilized enough to rest. The others required continued observation. No one was turned away. No care was withheld. On 18th of May 1945, Ingrid was asked to assist with translation. A German-speaking British officer needed help interviewing new arrivals for administrative processing. The officer, Lieutenant Parker, explained the purpose through careful, simplified German. We need names, places of origin, family information, for records, for eventual repatriation. Ingrid agreed. The interviews were conducted in a small office converted from the gymnasium's equipment room. Each woman was asked the same questions: name, age, place of birth, last known residence, occupation before capture, family members, medical conditions. The process was methodical, respectful. Parker took notes by hand, occasionally asking for clarification. He never pressed when a woman became emotional or reluctant to answer. One woman, Greta from Berlin, began crying when asked about family. She had lost her husband and both sons in the fighting. Her daughter was missing, last seen during the Soviet advance. Parker waited, allowed her to compose herself, then gently continued. When the interview concluded, he said, "We will register this information. If your daughter is found in any Allied zone, you will be notified." It was a small promise, perhaps an impossible one, but he said it with sincerity. The interviews continued through the week. Ingrid translated for 26 women. Each story revealed layers of loss: homes destroyed, families separated, futures erased. Yet each interview ended the same way. Parker thanked them, assured them of care, and filed their information in the growing administrative archive. On 26th May, Ingrid asked Parker a question. "Why do you do this? Keep such detailed records?" Parker considered his response. "Because you are people," he said. "Not numbers, not enemies, people who survived a terrible war, and people deserve to be documented, to be remembered, to be treated as individuals." The answer was simple, perhaps too simple, but Ingrid recognized its honesty. That evening she sat on her cot and attempted to write a letter. She had no address to send it to, no guarantee it would reach anyone. But she wrote anyway, describing the gymnasium, the British soldiers, the unexpected kindness. She ended with a question: how do we live with this? By late May 1945, the Quedlinburg facility began preparing for the next phase: relocation. The British military government was establishing larger displacement camps across the occupation zone. Quedlinburg would transition back to civilian use. The women would be transported to a permanent facility at Hildesheim, approximately 90 kilometers northwest. The announcement came during morning assembly on 27th May. Lieutenant Parker explained the plan through translation. "You will be moved to a larger camp with better facilities, more space, improved medical care, and a process for determining repatriation or resettlement. Transport will begin 1st June. You may bring personal belongings. All medical records will transfer with you." The women received this news with mixed reactions. Hildesheim was unknown territory. Quedlinburg, despite being a detention facility, had become familiar. Change meant uncertainty. But Parker emphasized one point repeatedly: the same standards of care will continue. You remain under British protection. Preparations began immediately. Medical staff compiled transfer files for each woman. Kitchen crews packed rations for the journey. Supply officers arranged lorries and escort vehicles. The logistical coordination was extensive, but executed smoothly. On 31st May, Ingrid helped pack kitchen equipment. She worked alongside Davies and another cook, wrapping utensils in canvas, securing pots in wooden crates. Davies gave her a small package, tea leaves wrapped in paper. "For the journey," he said. She accepted the gift with a nod of gratitude. That evening, she walked the perimeter of the facility one final time. The gymnasium had been a strange refuge, part hospital, part prison, part sanctuary. She had arrived expecting punishment and found professionalism. She had anticipated brutality and encountered bureaucracy. The contradiction still confused her, but she no longer questioned it constantly. At 06:30 hours on 1st June, the first transport departed. Ingrid rode in the third lorry, seated between Hilda and another woman named Anna. The journey took 4 hours, including a stop for refueling. They passed through towns bearing the marks of war: rubble, burned vehicles, displaced civilians walking along roadsides. At 10:45 hours, they arrived at Hildesheim. The camp was larger than Quedlinburg, more organized, more permanent. The Hildesheim displacement camp occupied a former Wehrmacht training facility. British engineers had converted barracks into housing units, established medical stations, and organized administrative offices. Capacity was listed at 450 persons. Current population, as of 1st June, was 287 women and 34 children. The children had been found separated from families or born in the immediate post-war period. Red Cross personnel managed child welfare services. Ingrid's group was assigned to Barracks C, a long single-story structure with bunk beds arranged in rows. Each woman received a footlocker for personal items. The barracks had electricity, unreliable, often cut during peak usage hours, and running water from a central pump. Latrines were external, maintained by rotation crews. The medical facility was significantly more advanced than Quedlinburg. 2 British doctors, Captain Morrison, transferred from Quedlinburg, and Major Ellis from a field hospital in Belgium, oversaw operations. 4 nurses provided daily care. Medical supplies were more abundant here, requisitioned from larger depots in the British zone. On 3rd June, Ingrid underwent a comprehensive medical examination. Morrison checked her burn scars, now healing well with proper treatment. He measured her weight, 49 kilograms, up from 42 at initial capture. "Good progress," he said through the camp translator. "Continue the current diet and supplement regimen." The camp established work assignments based on capability and preference. Ingrid requested kitchen duty and was approved. The Hildesheim kitchens were larger, equipped with field ranges and commercial-grade equipment requisitioned from German military stores. She worked under a British sergeant named Thompson, a professional cook before the war. Thompson ran his kitchen with strict efficiency, but no cruelty. He taught Ingrid and other German women British Army cooking standards: precise measurements, careful timing, thorough sanitation. "We feed 400 people daily," he said through translation. "That requires discipline." The work was demanding but purposeful. Ingrid spent 10 hours daily preparing meals, cleaning equipment, managing inventory. The routine provided structure and distraction from larger questions about the future. On 7th June, the camp received its first official mail delivery. Letters from displaced persons searching for family members. Ingrid had none. She had no one left to search for. On 15th June 1945, the International Red Cross established an office within the Hildesheim camp. Their purpose was documentation and family tracing. Every displaced person would be registered in the central database. Families separated by war could potentially reconnect through this system. The process was voluntary but encouraged. Ingrid registered on 18th June. She provided all available information: full name, birth date and place, parents' names, and last known locations, siblings, extended family. The Red Cross worker, a Swiss national named Müller, recorded everything meticulously. "This information enters a central registry in Geneva," he explained. "Copies are distributed to Allied zones and neutral countries. If anyone searches for you, they will find this record." Ingrid asked about searching for others. Müller showed her the inquiry forms. She could submit requests for specific individuals. The Red Cross would search their databases and contact any matches. She filled out 3 forms. Her mother, last seen in Salzgitter during the February bombing, her younger brother, conscripted into the Volkssturm in March, her cousin Elsa, who had worked in a field hospital near Magdeburg. Müller accepted the forms without making promises. "We will search. If they registered anywhere in Allied territory, we will find them. But understand, many records are incomplete, many people remain undocumented." The realistic assessment was appreciated. Ingrid had learned to distrust false hope. On 22nd June, a statistic appeared in the camp administrative log. Of 321 women currently housed at Hildesheim, 147 had submitted Red Cross tracing inquiries. Of those 147, 8 had received positive responses within the first week. The number was small, but significant. 8 families partially reunited through documentation. The camp's atmosphere shifted subtly after the Red Cross arrival. Women who had existed in limbo now had a process, a system, a tangible path toward reconnection or closure. Morale improved measurably. Medical staff noted decreased anxiety symptoms and improved sleep patterns among registered individuals. On 29th of June, Ingrid received her first response. Her mother's name appeared in a Red Cross database from the American zone. Location: Göttingen Refugee Center. Status: alive, recovering from injuries sustained during bombing. Contact information provided. Ingrid received permission to send a letter through official channels on 30th of June. She wrote 3 pages by hand, describing her capture, treatment by British forces, current situation at Hildesheim. She asked about her mother's injuries, her condition, her needs. She provided her own status and the camp's mailing address. She ended with a simple statement: "I survived. I am safe. I hope we can reunite soon." The letter was processed through British military postal services and forwarded to the American zone. Expected delivery: 10 to 14 days. While waiting for response, Ingrid continued her kitchen duties and began attending English language classes organized by camp education officers. The classes met 3 evenings weekly, teaching basic vocabulary and grammar. The instructor, a British corporal who had taught secondary school before the war, used practical examples: food terms, medical vocabulary, administrative phrases. By mid-July, Ingrid could conduct simple conversations without translation. "How are you today?" "I am well, thank you." "What do you need?" "I need soap and a blanket." The language represented more than communication. It symbolized adaptation to post-war reality. On 14th of July, her mother's response arrived. 4 pages, written in careful script. Her mother described the bombing of Salzgitter, her evacuation to Göttingen, treatment for a fractured leg and severe lacerations. She expressed relief at Ingrid's survival and gratitude toward the British for their care. She mentioned no news of Ingrid's brother. The letter concluded, "We will survive this, as we survived everything else. Hold on." Ingrid read the letter 3 times, absorbing every word. Her mother was alive. That single fact changed everything. The future, previously abstract and uncertain, now contained at least one concrete element: eventual reunion. On 18th of July, Lieutenant Parker approached Ingrid with a proposal. "We need experienced translators for administrative work. You've learned English quickly. You understand both German and British perspectives. Would you consider a formal position as camp translator? It would be paid work, through official channels." She accepted immediately. The position began 20th of July. Her duties included translation for medical appointments, administrative interviews, and general camp communications. The work was demanding but meaningful. Throughout late July and August 1945, the Hildesheim camp evolved. Population increased to 412 as additional displaced persons arrived from collapsing temporary facilities. The British administration expanded staffing and resources accordingly. New barracks were constructed using materials salvaged from damaged buildings. Additional medical personnel arrived, including a German doctor, Dr. Hartmann, who had been vetted and approved to work under British supervision. Ingrid's translation work placed her at the centre of camp operations. She attended daily briefings with British officers, translated medical consultations, and assisted with Red Cross documentation. The work revealed the scale of displacement. Thousands of German women across the occupation zones, separated from families, uncertain of their status, waiting for repatriation or resettlement decisions. One afternoon in early August, Major Ellis requested her presence during a medical consultation. A woman from Hamburg had developed complications from untreated tuberculosis. Ellis explained the diagnosis and treatment protocol, isolation, antibiotics, nutritional support. Ingrid translated carefully, ensuring the woman understood both her condition and the treatment plan. The woman, frightened and exhausted, asked, "Will you cure me?" Ellis responded through Ingrid's translation, "We will do everything possible. The treatment is effective if started promptly, which we have done. Your prognosis is good." That evening, Ingrid wrote to her mother again. She described her new role, the camp's operations, the continued British commitment to care. She mentioned receiving 50 Reichsmarks monthly as payment for translation work, a symbolic amount given the currency's collapse, but officially recorded nonetheless. On 15th August, Japan surrendered, ending World War II globally. The announcement reached Hildesheim via radio broadcast. British officers gathered the camp population to share the news. Parker addressed the assembly. "The war is truly over. All hostilities have ceased. We now focus on reconstruction and repatriation. Your situation remains unchanged. You are under British protection, receiving care according to international standards. As circumstances stabilize, we will work toward your return to families and communities." The statement was bureaucratic but sincere. For Ingrid and the others, the complete end of global warfare meant the beginning of something else, the long, complex process of rebuilding lives from the ruins. By September 1945, repatriation planning began in earnest. British military government established criteria for determining individual cases. Women with verified families in British or American zones would be reunited through coordinated transfers. Women whose homes were in Soviet-controlled territories faced more complex decisions. Many refused repatriation east, fearing persecution. Those without families or destroyed homes would be directed toward resettlement programs. Ingrid's case was straightforward. Her mother resided in Göttingen, within American zone boundaries. Transfer procedures required coordination between British and American authorities, documentation verification, and transport arrangement. On 12th of September, Parker informed Ingrid that her transfer had been approved. Departure was scheduled for 28th of September. She would travel by British military transport to Göttingen, where American authorities would facilitate reunion with her mother. The news generated conflicting emotions: relief at impending reunion, anxiety about change, strange reluctance to leave Hildesheim, where she had found unexpected stability. She had spent nearly 6 months in British custody, longer than she had spent in any place since the war began. On 20th of September, she assisted with translation for a new arrival, a young woman from Dresden, severely traumatized by the February bombing and subsequent Soviet occupation. The woman spoke haltingly, describing losses that transcended words. Dr. Hartmann and Captain Morrison worked together, providing medical care and psychological support. Ingrid translated with care, understanding the weight of each word. Later, Morrison approached her. "You've done excellent work here. Your translation has been essential to our medical operations. I've documented this in your file. When you leave, you'll receive a formal letter of reference. It may help with future employment." She thanked him, surprised by the gesture. On 27th September, her final full day at Hildesheim, Thompson, the kitchen sergeant, gave her a parting gift. A small cookbook, British Army issue, with handwritten notes in the margins. "Recipes," he said. "From my grandmother. Maybe they help you." She accepted the book with genuine gratitude. That evening she walked through the camp one final time. The barracks, the medical facility, the administrative offices, all had become familiar. Tomorrow she would leave. Tomorrow she would begin the next uncertain phase. At 8 hours on 28th September 1945, Ingrid Steinbauer departed Hildesheim. She travelled in a British Army lorry with 7 other women bound for American zone destinations. Lieutenant Parker accompanied the transport as escort officer. The journey covered approximately 120 kilometres. Expected duration 4 hours, including checkpoint delays. The route passed through Hanover, heavily damaged by Allied bombing, then south toward Göttingen. They stopped twice, once for vehicle inspection, once for documentation review at the zone boundary. American military police verified each passenger's transfer authorization before allowing passage. At 12:35 hours, the lorry arrived at the Göttingen Refugee Center. The facility housed approximately 600 displaced persons in converted school buildings. American Red Cross personnel managed daily operations. Ingrid's mother waited at the administrative office, informed of the arrival time that morning. The reunion was quiet, neither woman inclined toward dramatic displays. They embraced briefly. Her mother had aged significantly, hair grayer, face lined with exhaustion, movement limited by the still healing leg fracture. But she was alive, present, tangible. Parker completed the transfer documentation with American officials. He approached Ingrid before departing. "Best of luck," he said in simple German. "You survived something terrible. Remember that." She thanked him. Inadequate words for months of unexpected decency. The lorry departed at 13:15 hours. That evening, Ingrid and her mother sat in the small room assigned to them. 12 square meters, 2 cots, a shared wash basin. Her mother asked about the British camps. Ingrid described Quedlinburg and Hildesheim, the medical care, the administrative processes, the work she had done. "They treated you well?" her mother asked. Ingrid considered the question carefully. "They treated us as people," she said finally. "Not friends, not family, but as people who deserved basic dignity. I didn't expect that." Her mother nodded slowly. "The world is more complicated than we were told." That night Ingrid lay on the cot, listening to distant sounds of the refugee center. She thought about the past 6 months, the unexpected kindness, the bureaucratic precision, the careful maintenance of human dignity amid the rubble of collapsed civilization. She had survived. The future remained uncertain, but she had survived. British military records from the Hildesheim displacement camp document 1,247 German women processed through the facility between June and December 1945. Medical reports indicate mortality rate of 0.7%, significantly lower than comparable camps in other occupation zones. Administrative files note 873 successful family reunifications facilitated through Red Cross coordination. Post-war interviews with British personnel consistently reference adherence to Geneva Convention standards, though individual accounts vary regarding motivation. Some cite explicit orders, others describe personal moral choices within the framework of military discipline. Ingrid Steinbauer's file, preserved in British National Archives, contains medical records, work evaluations, and transfer documentation. Her final entry, dated 28 September 1945, includes a note from Captain Morrison. Patient made full recovery from malnutrition and burn injuries. Excellent work as translator. Recommended for civilian administrative employment. In 1947, Ingrid secured position with the American military government in Göttingen, utilizing her English language skills and translation experience. She worked in displaced persons administration until 1952, assisting with ongoing repatriation and resettlement cases. Her mother recovered fully from war injuries and lived until 1968. Ingrid never located her brother. His name appears on no surviving military or civilian records after March 1945. In a 1983 oral history interview, conducted by researchers documenting post-war experiences, Ingrid reflected on her time in British custody. "They didn't have to treat us well. They chose to. That choice mattered more than anything else that happened to me during the war. It showed me that humanity could survive even the worst circumstances. I carried that knowledge forward." The Hildesheim camp operated until 1947, eventually transitioning to German civilian administration. The facility was demolished in 1952. A small memorial plaque installed in 1985 marks the location. The inscription reads, "Here stood a place of refuge, 1945-1947. No other details are provided. In the British military archives, the final assessment of Operation Sanctuary, the designation given to displacement camp operations, notes simply, objectives achieved, humanitarian standards maintained throughout." The numbers had told the story. The people had lived it.